Welcome back to Made for More. I am your host, Holly J. Moore. I am a divorce lawyer who is passionate about helping all of us to use the really difficult things in our life to learn and grow and become a better version of ourselves tomorrow than we are today. I am joined today by my producer, Aaron Bender.
And we're joined today by Bryan Power of MyRelationshipFail.com. I'm curious, and he's talking about, integrated attachment theory?
Yes.
It's been a while since we've had an attachment theory person on the podcast today. I have no idea what integrated attachment theory is or any of the attachment theories.
Well, do you know what your attachment style is?
No, I need to ask my wife what my attachment style is. She tells me everything that I need to know on a regular basis.
And all the things you need to work on.
Yes, she picked out this outfit. It's fantastic.
Yes.
I'm attached. I don't know. Do you know yours? And have you accepted yours? Have you grown out of it? Like, how does that all work?
I think I know what my attachment style was back when I was looking for someone to attach to. I think it has changed into secure attachment.
Oh, good.
Which I think is like the holy grail. I think that's what we're all striving for is secure attachment. I think I'm there, but I don't know. I think I'll ask, like, if you're listening to this right now and you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about, because I'm about to say, like, I could also be disorganized attachment, where I don't even.
Oh, I've not heard of that.
Yeah, so we'll talk to him more about the different attachment styles and what they mean, but I think I'm somewhere in between secure attachment style and disorganized, which means, like, you're all effed up. So we'll find out. We are joined today by Bryan Power, Integrated Attachment Theory Coach. Bryan, welcome to the show.
Holly, thanks so much for having me on the show today. I'm excited to be here, and it's an honor to share my story here with your audience, and hopefully we can help some people have better relationships today. So thanks for having me on the show.
Yes, that would be great. You're gonna, I'm a divorce lawyer by day, so I'm hoping that you're gonna just put me right out of my day job.
I would love to.
Yes, I would love that too, actually. So I'm really excited to have you on the show because in my experience as a divorce lawyer, I've sort of used it as, an unofficial scientific research project on relationships. And I have found that attachment theory is so huge when it comes to relationships and why they work and why they fail and everything in between. So I'm really excited to talk to you about that. But first, tell us your story. Tell us how and why did you get here? How did you become interested in this?
Well, my wife and I almost ended up at your services. We went from having a pretty good relationship like most of us do, right? We met, we fell in love, everything was pretty great. We had a son together. And as the years went by, a lot of our disagreements, ultimately would lead to a really terrible 2024 where all those, death by 1,000 paper cuts type of thing, where in 2024, now all of a sudden we went to some pretty serious, issues. And a lot of our childhood trauma really began to play out. And we went from having what I thought was a pretty good relationship with some issues to having complete emotional chaos. And all of a sudden, things were devolving. And eventually, after about 4 months of that, she would actually seek a restraining order against me. And actually, it got that bad. It was more, just so you know, it was never a violent threat. I never threatened my wife with the physical harm. It was just emotional chaos, and to the point where she just needed to get some space. And so she went that route. And at that point, I just thought it was over. I just thought, man, this isn't fixable. Like, I don't know what's going on. It was so bizarre, so hurtful, so everything, But I just decided I was going to move on with my life and try to put it back together. And I was fortunate enough to come across the Integrated Attachment Theory program created by Thais Gibson out of Canada. Now, I had come across her work about a month before I actually left the house. And I was fascinated by the information she was sharing. And I thought, man, there's some really good, stuff in here. There's a lot of knowledge that I didn't know or understand. And I was learning like a sponge. And I was like, this is exciting work. And so even though I didn't think I could help, put my relationship back together with my wife, I was excited to just learn that stuff. And eventually I thought I'd have a good relationship with somebody. And right. Little did I know it would turn out to be, in this case, I was very fortunate where my wife was doing a lot of her own work while we were separated. And that the work that we both did would ultimately lead us back together and allow us to put it back together where we now share a pretty fantastic relationship, something that I never thought, could be like this. I never knew relationships could be this good, if you will. Right. And so even though I went from what I thought was okay to something now that's really much more amazing and terrific, because we have the skills, we have a lot more tools, a lot more awareness now that we're able to kind of really work in this relationship in a way that actually works. It doesn't, it's more healthy. It's a better approach. So anyway, yeah, that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
Wow. So I knew the gist of your story, obviously, in prepping for the episode. What I did not know is actually like you had a restraining order against you, and you have come back from that to having, a marriage that's more amazing than ever, it sounds like. That should give a lot of people a lot of hope, because I deal with restraining orders every day. And when you say, of course, there was no like physical violence, I get it. In California, you can get a restraining order on a text message with, one curse word or one sort of crossword to the other person. The standard is very low.
Right.
But what I also know about restraining orders, regardless of what the basis is for them, usually they indicate, well, they can also indicate that somebody is, carrying out a strategy, a legal strategy. But let's just put that aside for a moment and talk about the emotional aspect of it. By the time you get to the point of wanting to file a restraining order against someone, I mean, things are pretty bad, because the ramifications for that other person, the impact on that other person, on the restrained party, is pretty bad. So the fact that you guys have come back from that, wow, that should give a lot of people a lot of hope. But my burning question is how, because, and not everybody listening to this will truly understand the dynamics of a restraining order, but you're not allowed to talk to the other party. So how did you go from legally being not allowed to talk, because communication in repairing relationships is kind of essential, I think.
Yeah.
How did you go from not being allowed to even talk to your wife or be around her to actually repairing your marriage to the point where you're not divorcing, you're on the road to recovery, and in fact now have a great relationship?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I had to stay away, and I did that. I didn't want anything. Yeah, I wasn't trying to fix it. I was just trying to move on with my life anyway. So I was happy to stay away and kind of move on, and I was just doing the work that I needed to do. And then I started to be able to get visitation with my son, and so I was able to kind of pick him up in the front of the house, and I would see her at that point, but it was just to pick him up and go. And then so I did that for another month and a half, and then I was pretty much, I would just pull up and didn't even say hi, didn't wink, didn't nothing, right? And just
and as a lawyer, that's exactly what you should have been
that's
doing.
what you're supposed to do. So, and that's what I was doing. And so so eventually, after about a month and a half of that, I started to loosen up a little bit, and I just would wave and just be like, just to say hi a little bit, because again, I do have to co-parent with this woman for the rest of my life. So started to soften up a little bit, and then we wound up having literally a quick conversation about some things. I just apologized for my part in being in the emotional aspect of it. And at that point, she said that she still loved me. And I was like, well, I wasn't expecting that. I was like, okay. I said, well, if you do want to do anything, I said, then we have to get the restraining order off before we can talk again. We can't continue. We can't talk again, right? They're not supposed to talk. So we honored that. And so at that point, she put that in motion to take the restraining order off, which she did. It took about another month and a half to get that off. And then once it was off, we were then able to actually really have good communication. And it was pretty obvious from the beginning that things were different. We were just... we had different ideas about stuff. She really realized a lot of her own issues that she thought were my issues were hers, and vice versa. And we were beginning to take ownership of our own crap, if you will. And then just being able to kind of, communicate differently and be able to kind of really have some tools that we didn't have before. Really began to, I really began to see like, this is going to work. This felt like this could actually happen because, at first you don't know. You get back together and you're still kind of nervous about the whole thing. I have no idea where this was going to go.
Right.
But after a couple of months, it became pretty obvious that I think we were just in a totally different spot. And it's been a pretty amazing journey from there. It's been a really incredible journey for sure.
Yeah. So you mentioned in the time where you were, you had separated, in your physically, like you were separated because you had a restraining order, couldn't be around each other. You mentioned you kind of started to work on yourself. You came across attachment theory. What was it about attachment theory that like resonated so much with you, and then sort of led you? Because one of the things that you said, which really stuck out to me, is like in the first conversation that you had with her, you apologized for your part in it.
Sure.
And I think that's huge. I think a lot of people never get to that part. It's a lot of blame placing on the other person. So what resonated about attachment theory, and then how did you get to the part where you actually took ownership of your role in any of this?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that started all of this was she challenged me to go see a therapist when we started having a little fight with my son early in February of 2024. And when she did that, I said, okay, fair enough, I'll go.
Mm-hmm.
But I also challenged her to then see a therapist too, because in my mind, she was the one with all the issues. And of course, in her
Okay.
mind, I was the one with all the issues. And
Right.
so the first thing I learned, right, it was always
Yeah.
the way it is.
Yep.
We always think it's
And
the other
that's what
person.
keeps me in business.
Right, that's what keeps you
Yeah.
in business. That's right. So the first step is to take ownership. We have to realize that we're not perfect. I'm not showing up exactly how I want to be showing up. I was, doing some things wrong, and that's, I learned that, and I knew that because I came from a very dysfunctional family. Childhood was dysfunctional. So did my wife, and so we knew we kind of had some issues there, but we just didn't know how to fix them. Didn't know how to work through that. So it was just, devolving into this chaos, which it did. And then through the integrated attachment theory program, I watched a video by Thais Gibson on, she did a great podcast on the Mel Robbins show. And she talked about attachment theory. And I could see my wife was, leaning one way. She's, what's called more of a dismissive avoidant. I was
Mm-hmm.
leaning more anxious, preoccupied at the time.
Yep.
And I saw a lot of answers. I thought, man, wow, this is really interesting. And then when I began to learn more about the integrated attachment theory program, which is created by Thais Gibson, it's really a program developed to help us move from the unhealthy attachment styles to the healthy, secure attachment style. So it gives us 6 core elements to begin to work on that help move us from the unhealthy to the healthy. And I love that. I just love that type of work. And then, yeah, as far as, being able to just see, over time, a little bit of healing, it was probably at least 3 months or so before I finally accepted, like, you know what, I'm not perfect. I made my mistakes. I care about this woman as a person. She's not a bad person. She just has her own issues type of thing. But, I also knew that I wasn't perfect. I didn't show up exactly how I wanted to. And so I just wanted to apologize for my part. Hey, I'm sorry for the way I behaved. I'm sorry for the way I acted in this. And I'm sorry for, I know that I'm part of why this relationship broke up, if you will. Right. So, and that was it. I just wanted to take that ownership. And at that point, it actually turned around and she was doing the same thing. She realized a lot of her issues and the way that she was showing up, and she felt really bad about that. And so
Right.
through there, I think we just both were able to say, wow, you know what? Okay, let's see what we can do from here. And yeah, that was kind of the start of it.
Yeah. Wow. That's beautiful. So, Aaron and I talked a little bit in our first segment on the show about attachment theory, and I made sure. I'm glad you just mentioned some of the different types of attachment styles, because I was like, well, we'll ask Bryan about this. We'll ask him to define them for us,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
Aaron doesn't know what his attachment style is.
Yeah.
So for the benefit of
Yeah.
anyone that is not familiar with different attachment styles, can you sort of quickly brief us on the different styles and how that sort of shows up? Like, how does somebody know if they're dismissive,
Yeah.
avoidant? How does somebody know if they're anxiously attached? All that.
Sure. Yeah, I'll give you a quick synopsis on that. So there's
Yeah.
4 different attachment styles. Number 1 is that healthy, secure attachment style. That's the one we all want to be. They're very good at communicating. They know how to set healthy, good boundaries. They're very more emotionally balanced and stable. The relationship is important to them, but it's not like overbearing. If you break up with them, they're going to hurt a little bit, but they're going to move on with their lives a little bit. It's not like they're all encompassed type of thing. They just do it well, right? And that's the one that we all want to aspire to be. Unfortunately, I think most of us fall in the other 3 categories. And number 1, you have what's called an anxious preoccupied. That's somebody who really values and craves connection, really loves a lot of communication to the point where it's unhealthy, maybe communicating, texting all day long, on the phone all day long, just always there, right? To the point, a lot of times they'll people please to the point where it's unhealthy again, putting themselves last and making the relationship so much, that they have no boundaries. They're just like a doormat, right? Hey, as long as the relationship is okay, we're together, that's all that matters to me. And so that's the anxious preoccupied. On this flip side of that is what's called a dismissive avoidant. Dismissive avoidants have a hard time connecting to their emotions. A lot of times they isolate a lot. They like a lot of space. They don't want to communicate all day long. They really crave a lot of space, and they like to kind of work through their own emotions on their own, and very hyper independent. Really kind of just hate the idea of commitment. That's a really tough one for them. And so that's just opposite, right? You can see where that could be a problem if you have 2 of those people in the same relationship. Last but not
Yes.
least, you have what's called a fearful avoidant. And a fearful avoidant kind of swings between both sides. A lot of times, one week they may be really connected, feeling great about the relationship, and then the following week the fear comes up, and next thing you know, they're breaking up with you for no reason. Usually there's a lot of chaos involved in that, right? There's a lot of lack of trust. Trust is a big issue for people with fearful avoidant. And there's just a lot of that back and forth you never know what you're getting type of thing. And usually they came from dysfunctional families like myself, where there was a lot of chaos and craziness. And so that's just what we get used to. And sometimes that's what we kind of bring into our relationships as adults. But if you want to get more detailed, definitely go look up the Thais Gibson website, on YouTube, Thais Gibson video on the Mel Robbins podcast. And she really gives a good explanation. It's about an hour and 15-minute long, but you will really get some good info on attachment styles.
Okay, great. Now I'm familiar with the term disorganized attachment style. Is that the same thing as the fearful avoidant,
yeah.
where
Yeah.
you kind of like vacillate between the two? Yeah.
Yes, a lot of people call it disorganized as well.
Yeah. Okay. So, how did you know? Because one of the things that we didn't talk about it on camera, but Aaron and I talked about this morning, was, how often do I get people hiring us for a divorce and then, they decide to reconcile? Mm-hmm. And, percentage wise, I would say maybe it's 5%. It's not a lot. But one of the things that I always think about is like, oh dear, how long until they're back? Because a lot of them do come back.
Yeah.
So I have a couple questions. One, how do you know if the relationship is worth saving? I guess that would be my first question.
Yeah, I think number one, if the love is still there, like my wife and I, we loved each other. We just didn't really know how to do it right. So that was the first thing. The love was there. We had a lot of fun. We had a lot of laughs together. We had kids together. So that was the first step. And then the second thing is really, I think, are we moving the needle? Are things changing? Are we actually seeing some progress in the way we're handling things? If we're still stuck in that chaotic experience and, nothing's really changed and we're just back into that same old fighting and arguing and nobody's listening properly and we don't have those tools, right? And so if we haven't learned those things, then sometimes we'll find ourselves back in that same situation, and they are back, right? They are coming back to you and saying, yeah, we tried it for another year and we're back to the same spot because they didn't change, they didn't grow, they didn't see anything different, right? So that's the thing I love about the 6 core elements of the integrated attachment theory program. It gives me 6 things to actually move the needle. And so as I can see, like, oh, wait a second, I have different ways on how to communicate. Okay, that's great. That's a tool that I didn't have before,
Right.
I know how to set some boundaries. I've changed my behaviors in a way that, is healthier now. I learned how to deal with my emotions more healthy now. So I'm not flying off the handle and doing things that are improper. And so when you just do all that, you start to see that needle move. But I think those are the 2 main things. Is the love still there? Do you really care about each other deeply? And then, are you able to kind of really see some things move in a different way, and where you're actually handling things differently, and you can see some hope. You can see like, okay, wait a second, we're working through this. We're both trying. We're both interested in really making this work, and it seems like we are making some progress. So those are my 2 key things.
Okay, so I actually had this question written down, and then and now is a good time to ask it, because you say one of the core elements is, is the love still there? My question is love enough? Is love alone enough?
So I don't believe it is, unfortunately. I think, again, most of us get into relationships. You're married, right? Nobody gets married because they hate each other. They get married because they're in love. At that time, they feel like this person is wonderful and they just want to spend the rest of their lives with this person. But again, through the lack of understanding, the lack of understanding ourselves and our partners, that begins to dissolve. And over the next period of years, whatever it might be, 2, 5, 10, 20 years, all of a sudden we find ourselves one day waking up and going, who is this person? And do I even like this person? And, we can't seem to communicate. We don't know how to handle problems together. And I just think we don't have the tools. A lot of times I really feel like, certainly in my case, I didn't have any tools. I didn't know how to do real communication. My wife, before, she would try to communicate with me and have disagreements, if you will. We would kind of have a serious subject. And I was always listening to defend myself, because my own wounds wouldn't allow me to think that she's, trying to communicate and criticizing me in a healthy way. I was listening to defend myself. And so she would say, you're not listening to me. And I'd say, yes, I am. Of course I'm listening. But I wasn't listening properly. I was listening to not understand her, not to truly get what she was trying to teach me or tell me or share with me. I was trying to listen so that I could protect myself because of my own fear. And so I just learned that so much of this is subconscious. A lot of it comes back to our subconscious wounds, our patterns that we've developed, and how we think and perceive relationships should be. And because those are still stuck in an unhealthy filter, if you will, that's what we're acting on. We're acting on these unhealthy filtered experiences that are now causing problems in our adult lives. And so we've got to tap into all that stuff, learn how to change, figure out what our wounds are, learn how to change those wounds, and then get these other tools that we can add to our repertoire, if you will. So we know which tool to use in certain situations. And once you do that, I always say it's like a house. If your house was falling apart, but you had the right tools and you had the knowledge on how to keep your house fixed, you wouldn't worry about it. But if your house is falling apart and you don't have the tools and you don't know how to fix anything, all of a sudden it becomes a chaotic mess. You're like, oh my God. So we got to get the tools necessary to keep the house afloat, keep the house together, not afloat, but
yes. If it was a boat, we need to keep
yes,
it afloat. But a house, we need a strong
perfect.
foundation.
That's
yes.
right.
So if you mentioned wounds a couple times, and I know core wounds sort of play into attachment theory. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like what are core wounds in general? What are the types of core wounds and how do those play into attachment style and how we are relating in our relationships?
I mean, there's a whole slew of different types of wounds. So certainly for me, it was like a fear of abandonment was a big one, right? So if I feel like I'm going to be abandoned, then I'm going to act on that. I'm going to do everything I can to protect that and keep it from somebody leaving me. Feeling of being unsafe is a big one for all three of those attachment styles. Will have the fear of being unsafe. That's a big one. Fear of being alone is a big one for like anxious preoccupied as well. Not good enough is a big one for that as well. Yeah, and then the different attachment styles each have their own category as to what's going on there. And so again, a lot of times like lack of trust is a big one for fearful avoidance. They just have a hard time with trust. Yeah, they're just crazy. There's a lot of different ones, but you got to tap into those and start to heal those for sure.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this. I've asked this question, or I don't know if I've asked this question, but I've heard other people talk about this idea. So I want to get your thoughts on it. But do you believe like Bryan is an X attachment style person, Holly is an X attachment style person, and regardless of who my partner is, it's always that way? Or do you believe attachment style can sort of shift based on the dynamics of the relationship?
Yeah, I'm one of the people that believes that I feel like we're almost all kind of almost in that fearful avoidant where we do swing a little bit between the anxious and the the dismissive, right? I do feel like depending upon the relationship, sometimes we can. Now, some people are definitely more stronger on that dismissive side. They are definitely leaning heavily dismissive. And there are some that are definitely more anxious, but I think a lot of us do fall in between that. We can swing, depend upon the relationship and the experience there. We can go between the two for sure, yeah. And I do think we can heal that too. So we can heal these wounds and move to the secure side. So that is the goal.
Okay, you read my mind because my next
I knew
question
that was
is,
next.
yes, you read my mind. It must be all the work that you've done,
That's right.
What can we do to all strive to move towards secure attachment?
Yeah, and so that's the thing. We weren't born with these attachment styles. We learn these attachment styles. And so just like we learned them, we can unlearn them and learn a new way. And that's what I love about Tice Gibson's work with the Integrated Attachment Theory program. The 6 core elements, the core wounds, your needs, your emotions, your boundaries, your communications, and your behaviors. Those are the 6 pillars, if you will, that you work on. Now, when you change and begin to heal all of those, you really start to move the needle towards that secure state. And now you're having healthy, good, again, tools that you can utilize. So again, how do I communicate to move the needle? Rather than just, again, the way my wife and I were communicating wasn't moving the needle properly. That was just unhealthy communication. How do I have healthy, good communication? How do I set boundaries that are reasonable, healthy, that are obviously, you need to have some boundaries in your life. What's important to me? I need to have that kind of, around me. And then how do I make sure that people respect my boundaries, right? And so when we start to do all these things, that's what moves us towards the secure. But I truly do believe it starts with this, learning the wounds that we have. What are my core wounds? What are the stories I'm really telling myself subconsciously that are causing me now to act in certain ways? So if it's that fear of abandonment, like it was for me, I was now hanging on to this relationship so tightly that my wife needed to get away. She needed this space because I was holding on. So the more I tried to hold on, the more she tried to get away. And so that's where we got into this dynamic of, hey, if I had known that better and I was able to handle that better, I could have given her a little bit more space. I wouldn't have taken it so personally. I would have relaxed a little bit more, and it would not have escalated to the point where it did. So that's where we can kind of begin to do all that stuff and do that type of work. That's what moves the needle.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what would be your advice to someone? Because what I see a lot in my work as a divorce attorney is, a client comes in and they're like, the other person just refuses to work on things. Like, I want to save the marriage. desperately, maybe they do too, but like they just don't want to do the work. What is your advice in that situation?
So I've heard it said this way, and I love it. It's two is better than one, but one is better than none. Okay, so you may not have your partner doing the work with you, but one person truly doing this work can truly change the dynamic of that relationship. And a lot of times your partner will come along with you. All right. So a lot of times that partner will begin to change, even if they don't realize it, because the way you're handling things, they almost have to change because they're going to react to that. If they don't come along with us, enough, and eventually we kind of outgrow them, and we do get to a really healthy spot, and they're still really stuck in the chaotic, unhealthy spot. Sometimes that does end in divorce. That is sometimes or breakup, and that is kind of where that goes, unfortunately. But I always say, do the work. If you know you need to do the work, then do the work, and you never know where you can land. Because if nothing else, if you stay stuck in the unhealthy stuff, you're always going to be broken. You're always going to have that terrible connection, that bad relationship. So if you at least do the work, that gives your relationship a chance to work it through. Or at the very least, you're going to get to a spot where you know how to have good relationships. And even if that relationship does end, you will be able to eventually attract somebody else. And now you're going to be able to operate and have a good, healthier, good relationship. And even if it does end in divorce, the other thing I always say is you'll be able to hopefully have a little bit more of an amicable divorce, because, especially if you have kids, you're going to have to deal with this person the rest of your life. So if you can have a little bit better understanding of yourself, how you operate, and then even a little bit more knowledge about your now ex, if you will, you may get a little bit better ability on how to work through those problems, if you will.
That is a great point. Yeah. Probably doing the work will just help you in life in general.
Absolutely. You can't lose when you do the work. Absolutely. You cannot lose if you do the work.
Right. So speaking of doing the work, what is something that's super practical that anybody in a relationship could start doing today?
I think the first thing is to learn what your attachment style is. And you can do that by going to my website. You can actually take a free quiz on my website at myrelationshipfail.com. That's a quick one to do. Or again, watch that Tice Gibson video where, again, talks about the attachment styles. That's great stuff. Something simple, though, that you can do is like literally, I think just learning how to emotionally regulate is huge. So sometimes just like if you're emotionally dysregulated, learning how to just maybe put your shoes on and go for a hike or a walk, or go take a yoga class, or do something where you can really get yourself more regulated and never have communication when you're in a dysregulated state. So if you and your spouse are having trouble and you're trying to, work through some problems, but it's becoming really highly emotionally charged, that's a really good time to step away. But you want to step away by communicating that, not just by stepping away. So you want to say, hey, you know what, honey, I'm really feeling emotional right now. This is not a good time. I definitely want to talk about this in the future. But right now, can we put this on the shelf so I can get myself into a better state so that we can revisit this? That's a healthier way to kind of approach that than to just say walking away. Because if you just walk away, your spouse has no idea what you're thinking. And then they're wondering if you are ever going to talk about this. Maybe they don't think you care at that point. So it's tough, but that's a little trick I think you can start to do, is just, again, learn how to kind of regulate yourself before you have really crazy, serious conversations about these types of things.
Right. Okay, that's good. And then for my last question, you've mentioned, like you've got to be able to move the needle and sort of make progress on these things. How do we know if we're moving the needle or not?
That's a great question. So if you set a little boundary and somebody respects it, where maybe they didn't before, that could be huge, right? That's a big awareness. For my wife and I talk about the way we communicated before. Now we communicate in a way where, we'll do what's called holding space, where she'll talk for 5 or 10 minutes. I was notorious in the past of interrupting her as she went because I was always trying to defend myself. Yeah. Now I do it. She talks completely uninterrupted. We stare each other in the face. And then when she's done talking, I then get to talk for 5 or 10 minutes and share my thoughts on this subject, if you will. Also completely uninterrupted. But now we're listening to understand each other. And now all of a sudden we can come out of that experience and thinking, okay, we feel like we've connected here. We definitely have moved the needle. Do you understand a little bit more? Yeah, I totally get it. And now we're having this experience where it's like, okay, that's moving the needle. We know when we come out of that. That's totally different than what we ever did before. So that's another big one. Am I able to kind of regulate myself? Is my spouse learning how to maybe get more emotionally balanced? Is that something they're doing? Are we finding ourselves, with healthier habits on a daily basis, or are we just continuing to fall into some really bad patterns? I think all those things are just, a little awarenesses as to like, okay, things definitely seem to be changing and we're doing things differently than we did before. It's not necessarily you're going from 0 to 60, but if you can see like, okay, we're starting to move in the right direction, that's a really good positive sign. And then if you're continuing to do that work, you can look back in 3 months, 6 months from now, maybe a year, and go, wow, we are doing things night and day different. And it feels different. It feels great. It feels really a wonderful experience compared to what you had before. And now you're looking forward every day to share that day with your spouse. And you're having fun, you're enjoying each other. You know that, you know how to work through problems, and it just feels darn good. It feels really good.
I
Yeah.
love that. Okay, but be honest. Are you
Yeah.
always truly listening 100% of the time, just listening, or sometimes you're still listening to respond?
I do my best to practice that. Yeah, I mean, listen, that's an old pattern, right? So,
Yeah, that's
uh,
that's the real question is, do you find yourself like falling back into the old patterns every now and
you
again?
can, but I would say not as much, and certainly not to the severity that it was before, right? So, but yes, of course, that's always something that is just takes practice, takes a lot of work, and takes continuing to, be aware of that, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I don't do it nearly as much, and I
Yeah.
think that practice that we have, where I literally don't talk, and I just really am forced to look at her in the face. Now that's almost forcing me to really pay attention more than I can't drift off into la la land, and also with the attitude of knowing that she's not really trying to attack me. So I don't have to feel
Yeah.
that she's communicating to hurt me. She's trying to communicate because she wants to share her heart with me. And I want to hear what this woman, I want to hear her heart. I want to see her heart. I want to understand her. I want to know this woman. She's an amazing woman. I want to know. So why won't I listen to pay attention to her so I can gain understanding about this woman more so than just worrying about, feeling like I have to defend myself. So do I
Right.
occasionally fall back into that old pattern? Yeah, but probably hopefully not as much as I used to, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I lied. I do have one more question. How has this impacted your son?
I think it's been a game changer. I mean, I know for my wife really had a harder time connecting to the children before. She was, again, more that dismissive where, trying to connect to the emotions sometimes was harder. I think she's doing a much better job of being able to connect with the kids, which is huge. We're definitely on a different, that was one of our main problems is we had a lot of fights about our parenting styles. And so
Okay.
now, because of this work that we're doing, we are much more on that pattern of, really together on how we parent together. We're really more in tune
Right.
with our kids' emotions and how, they're feeling and what they're talking
Sorry, you have
about.
multiple kids. I thought you only had one son.
We have one together, and then we have a stepdaughter. I have a stepdaughter from her
Okay,
first
got it.
marriage. So I have a
Okay.
14-year-old stepdaughter. So between the two, they keep us busy. But yeah, our whole goal, honestly, for the most part, is really we don't want to pass this trauma on to them. We want our
Right.
kids to grow up with really good, healthy emotions and being able to, kind of work through their problems. And we pray that they would have really great relationships early on in their lives, not have to go through, multiple broken relationships like I have. And
Yes.
yeah, I'm 56 years old. It's taken me almost 56 years really to kind of figure this stuff out. I'm hoping that my kids will learn this early on in their lives, and I hope every kid would. I would love to see this stuff taught early in life because I
Right.
think there's nothing more important in life than to learn how to have good relationships with people. So, but yeah, I think it's been
Yes.
a game changer for our family in general, for sure.
Wonderful. Well, congratulations on, doing like turning it all around. That's a pretty amazing story, certainly in my, in my field. Like that's fairly unheard of to go from a restraining order to, having a thriving marriage. So congratulations. Certainly, it is because of the work that you and your wife have done. So that's truly inspirational and quite amazing. So, Bryan, thank you for being on the show today, and thank you for telling us your story, and thank you for the work that you're doing.
Holly, thank you so much for having me on the show. And like I said, I hope we can save at least one relationship here with this video, and hopefully
Yep.
keep them out of your office. I don't want to put you out of business, but then again, I
I
kind
don't
of do.
mind. I will
Okay,
find
okay,
something
great.
else to do.
There
Yes,
you
I
go.
don't mind at all.
Awesome. I love it. I think relationships are just the key to happiness in life. And so, the
You're
ability to
right.
learn how to have good relationships is just so vital and so important. I just think so many of us we just haven't learned these skills. And so don't
Yeah.
beat yourself up. don't feel like it's all your fault. It's not maybe not all your fault, but you definitely have to take a look at yourself and see how we can show up differently. How can I take ownership of my own stuff and grow past this and use this experience, whatever point you are in your marriage or your divorce, whatever it is. How can I learn from this? What can I learn and grow so that I can be a better person, whether or not my spouse and I get back together, or again, whether I have to move on in my life. I want to put myself in a better position so that I can have a really great, healthy, good relationship with somebody in my future. Sometimes, if you're lucky enough, like me, it turns out to be your spouse coming back into your life. And so you never know. Anything can happen.
You never know. Anything can happen. And I have heard the term, they say you are married to like three different people in your lifetime, but if you're doing it right, it's the same person, but it's just they're evolving and you're evolving, and and you're getting different versions, and hopefully each time it's a better version. So it sounds like you are definitely on that path.
That's right. I like it. I'm happy where I'm at. I know that it's a whole lot better than what it was.
Yes. Amazing.
Yeah.
I've got just a little bit more to say. I could not agree more with Bryan in talking about how critical our relationships are to our happiness, to our success. And I know maybe we're not supposed to say that because we should be fine all on our own and our self-worth is, all internal and all of that. But the reality is connection is so important. You're going to have relationships in your life no matter what, whether it's a marriage, a long-term romantic partner, relationships at work, parenting relationships. Like, relationships are such a huge part of life. And the more work we can do to make those relationships better, the happier we will be. And one of the things that really resonated with me that Bryan said was, when you're in a situation where maybe you're the only one willing to do the work, because I see that a lot in my job as a divorce lawyer. One person really wants to work on the relationship and the other person does not. There's still value to doing that work yourself. And even if you're thinking about a marriage that maybe looks like it may end, there's still a ton of value to doing this work all on your own. And so I know that all of you out there watching and listening and tuning in are going to be willing to do this work because you were made for more. Do you want to know a fun fact about all my wealthiest clients, what they have in common?
Absolutely, yes.
They all own actual gold bars.
Wait, but like actual
those
gold giant bars. Scrooge McDuck bars?
So they don't, so in real life, and I actually know this, because I own some gold bars, but I also actually know this because one of my last things that I did for my most favorite client of all times, but he was also the most wealthiest client I had ever represented, is the last thing I did in his divorce was deliver to him his portion of the gold bars that had been in the safety deposit box at the bank.
Whoa.
And so, you always think of gold bars as like on, like what Scrooge had on the cartoons. They don't actually look like that. But it's true. All my wealthiest clients actually own gold bars.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's one of the best investments over time is gold. And that's where Birch Gold comes in, can help you roll over your IRA into gold or silver. Much more about that in the link in our show notes.
A prenuptial agreement, or sometimes called a premarital agreement, is an agreement that two parties enter into before they get married that basically chooses to deviate from state law. It assigns rights and responsibilities regarding assets and debts that are acquired during the marriage. Some common misconceptions about prenups are, one, that they basically doom the marriage to failure, or that it's really planning to divorce, and neither of those things are true. But the real value of a prenup is talking about and creating rules around how the things that you acquire during the marriage are going to be characterized. A prenup can protect things like art collections, real estate portfolios, businesses, all those types of assets. The ideal timeline to get a prenup is not 2 weeks before the wedding. The final version of a prenup has to be presented to the parties 7 days before they actually sign it. So there's like a 7-day waiting period. As soon as you get engaged, you should seek a lawyer's advice and counsel on a prenup and start the process then, because the closer the prenup is signed to the wedding, the more likely that the court is going to think there was some sort of duress involved in that person signing it, and they have to prove that the prenup was signed voluntarily in order for them to be enforced. At Moore Family Law Group, we represent a lot of high-profile people, celebrities, professional athletes, business tycoons. If you already have a lot of assets or you think you're going to be acquiring a lot of assets during your marriage, we are the best ones to protect that for you and help you make your marriage stronger. Call Moore Family Law Group today.